While repairing the power lines in my parents' basement, the electrician suddenly turned white as a sheet and started shaking. He whispered, "Pack your stuff and get out now. Don't tell your parents." I glanced toward the basement, terrified, and instantly dialed the police. I used to believe the greatest heartbreak of my life was watching my father abandon my mother for another woman. I was dead wrong. The real nightmare began on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, in the damp, musty silence of our old house's forbidden basement, where a shocking secret lay waiting, a truth so vile, it threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. My name is Jacob Caldwell, and I'm 24. Fresh out of college, staring out at the rain-soaked streets of Portland, Oregon, from my tiny apartment, I often wonder how my life got so twisted. Some days, I feel like a forgotten puzzle piece in my family's picture, one no one ever truly wanted to fit. But to understand any of it, we have to go back to when I was just a boy, living in that big, 3-story craftsman house in the suburbs, right when the first cracks began to show. We weren't rich, but we never wanted for anything. My dad, Samuel Caldwell, was a tall man, commanding, with eyes that seemed to see everything except, it felt like, me. He owned a construction company, always consumed by blueprints and grand ambitions. That ambition, I think, built a chasm between him and my mother, Monica. My mom, with her soft brown hair and a smile like warm autumn sun, she loved me. I knew it. She'd tell me fairy tales for hours, stroking my hair during those scary nighttime storms. But their marriage? It was a house built on sand. Beautiful from a distance, but one big wave, and it all came crashing down. I remember those nights. My mom, silent in the kitchen, her eyes red, while my dad grumbled about money. I was just 10, clutching my worn teddy bear in bed, my heart constricting with every argument echoing through the thin walls. Then came that day. The divorce. My mom sat on the sofa, a small suitcase at her feet, her trembling hands pulling me into a suffocating embrace. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice choked with tears, "you are everything to me." But the court didn't see it that way. Custody went to my dad. Stable job, nice house, promises of a better life. My mom, with her meager part-time job, didn't stand a chance. She left to live with my grandparents, a few hours away. When that door closed, I felt a piece of my heart rip away. I stood there, frozen, watching her fade into the distance, wondering if I'd done something wrong to make her leave. From then on, I changed. The laughing, playful boy vanished. The world suddenly felt fragile, everything I loved, ready to disappear. My dad? He didn't seem to notice. He was too busy rebuilding his own life. To him, I was just a small detail in his grand plan, easily overlooked. 2 years later, when I was 12, Serena arrived. She became my stepmother, marrying my dad within months of them meeting. She was much younger, barely in her 30s, with glossy blonde hair and a sweet smile that always felt fake. She was charming. She made my dad laugh, something I hadn't seen him do since Mom left. But her gaze towards me? Always cold, like she was looking through me. "Jacob, are you okay?" she'd ask, but the words were empty, just filling the silence. My dad changed too, becoming utterly dependent on her, letting her decide everything. Schools for their 2 kids, John, 12 years younger than me, and Lily, 14 years younger, even what to buy for dinner. John and Lily, my half-siblings, became the sun around which my dad and Serena's new world revolved. They were adorable, I won't lie. John loved soccer. Lily would snuggle up during cartoon marathons. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling I was an outsider. A ghost, really, haunting hallways where my mother's laughter once echoed, now filled with a crushing sense of estrangement. Our craftsman house, my childhood home, started feeling different. Still beautiful, with its large windows and wild garden, but inside, the air grew heavy, like an invisible fog had settled in. And the basement. Oh, the basement. That's where the real unease festered. It was deep underground, accessed by an old wooden staircase descending into pure darkness. The musty smell, the chilling cold, the sound of seeping water, it all made me shudder. As a child, I was curious, but Serena, from the moment she moved in, absolutely forbade me from going down there. "It's dangerous, Jacob," she'd say, her voice soft but sharp, not a place for kids. My dad never objected. And I, a 12-year-old, didn't dare question it. But every time I passed that door, an inexplicable dread clung to me, as if something sinister lurked in the shadows. The years that followed were steeped in loneliness. I learned to hide my emotions, to force a smile for Serena, to nod blankly when my dad talked about his company. But deep down, I knew I didn't belong. My only solace was my calls with Mom. Monica, though far away, was my lighthouse in the darkest storms. I'd call her on weekends, pouring out my school day, my dreams, the sorrows I couldn't share with anyone else. "You're stronger than you think, Jacob," she'd say, her voice a warm embrace through the phone. Dad never forbade it, which was probably the only thing he got right. Those conversations were a balm, but they couldn't fill the void left by the divorce. I missed the old days, our family around the dinner table, Mom humming in the kitchen, Dad asking about my drawings. Now it was Serena's perfectly arranged dishes, polite but empty words, John and Lily laughing, my dad nodding along, and me trying to swallow food that had no taste. I was truly realizing I was no longer part of this family. Serena subtly pushed me to the sidelines. She never said it outright, but I felt it in her glances, in how she spent every moment with John and Lily, rarely asking about me. Once, I overheard her talking to my dad in the kitchen. "Jacob's grown up. He'll manage on his own." Her voice was soft, but the ice in it froze me. My dad just mumbled. I knew he'd chosen her side. My teenage years passed in quiet solitude. I buried myself in school, books, dreams of a future where I could leave that house behind. At 18, I finally did. Moved to college in Portland, started living on my own. But even gone, the memories, especially of that dark basement, haunted me. I had no idea that years later, that very basement would unveil a horrifying secret, forcing me to see my entire life in a completely different, terrifying light. Now, at 24, I'm a college graduate, navigating a jumble of unformed ambitions. I live in my small rented apartment, the scent of coffee from downstairs mixing with the city's frantic pace. It's not spacious, but it's mine. I work part-time at an old bookstore, my only income supplemented by a modest allowance from my mom. She's still my anchor, sending me money and hastily written letters full of encouragement. "You'll find your path, Jacob." I keep those letters in a small wooden box, a tangible reminder that someone, somewhere, truly cares. I visit her often, those weekends a balm for my soul, sipping tea, listening to her old stories. I feel like me again, a Jacob who doesn't have to hide. With my dad and Serena, though, it's a different story. I keep my distance, only occasionally visiting the Craftsman house, usually when John or Lily text me. My relationship with my father now feels like a fragile thread, stretched to its breaking point. Serena, on the other hand, still plays the perfect stepmother, all polite inquiries and calculated smiles. But I know, beneath that facade, there's nothing but distance. Then, a few months ago, things got strange. I'm not sure when it started, but my body just didn't feel like mine anymore. Sudden, crushing headaches, like someone was hammering at my temples. Some days, I'd wake up dizzy, the world tilting. Fatigue clung to me, persistent and inexplicable. I'd always been healthy, rarely caught a cold, so these symptoms terrified me. I saw a doctor, went through every test imaginable, brain scans, blood work, but everything came back normal. "It's probably stress, Jacob," the doctor said, prescribing supplements, advising rest. I took them religiously, but nothing changed. The exhaustion persisted, an invisible shadow trailing me everywhere. Around that same time, Serena suddenly became attentive. Phone calls started coming more frequently, her voice syrupy sweet. "Jacob, it's been a while since you came home. Why don't you join us for dinner this weekend?" I wanted to believe her, wanted to think that after all these years, she genuinely wanted to mend things. But every time I heard her voice, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt off. I just couldn't pinpoint what. I started visiting my dad's house more often, partly from Serena's invites, partly to see John and Lily. Family dinners were in the familiar dining room, warm glow, aroma of food. But every time, that strange feeling would return. The meticulously prepared food sometimes had an odd taste, not spoiled, but something indescribable, metallic or chemical. I once asked Serena about a dish, but she just smiled and said it was a new recipe. My dad, oblivious as ever, ate quickly, mumbled about work, then buried himself in his phone. John and Lily laughed innocent. I was the only one sitting there, feeling like I was swallowing unease with every bite. That feeling intensified whenever I stayed overnight. Some nights, I jolt awake to strange sounds echoing from the basement, clanging metal, like something heavy being dragged. Then a sharp, acrid smell, like incense mixed with chemicals, would drift through the crack under my door. I'd lie there, heart pounding, straining to listen. But when I'd creep out, the hallway was dark, silent, as if it had all been my imagination. The next morning, I'd try the basement door. Always locked. Tight. As if meant to keep out the curious. I asked Serena about it once, trying to sound casual. "It's nothing, Jacob," she said, her eyes flickering over me like lightning. Just for safety. Those visits took a toll. The headaches became more frequent, sometimes so intense I'd lie in the dark, clutching my head. Dizziness, fatigue, that unnamed heaviness. I started tracking my symptoms, desperately seeking a pattern. Was it stress or diet? But deep down, a vague, chilling instinct began to grow. Something was wrong in that house. In the meals. In Serena's calculating glances. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that my loneliness was just morphing into something sinister. But the instinct clung to me, a persistent whisper in my mind, urging me to be careful. I tried to stay calm, to tell myself I was overreacting. Weeks passed. I focused on job interviews, extra shifts at the bookstore, calls with my mom. But every time I thought about the Craftsman house, my heart raced. I started avoiding visits, making excuses for Serena's dinner invites. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while tidying my apartment, I realized I'd left important things at my dad's house, a folder of university documents, an old camera. I hesitated. The family was away on a trip, the house would be empty. But I needed those things. I decided to stop by, grab them, and leave quickly. The Portland sky was overcast that day, heavy with the threat of rain. I drove to the Craftsman house, the place I once called home. Parking in the driveway, I noticed the eerie quiet. No Lily's laughter, no Dad grumbling, no Serena's saccharine voice. They were on vacation, and I hadn't been invited. A familiar pang of hurt, though I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. I unlocked the front door with the spare key my dad had given me. The house was silent, save for the steady ticking of the wall clock. I headed to my old room, where a few things remained. On the dusty desk, I found the folder and camera. As I reached for them, my eyes caught a framed photo on the bookshelf. My dad, Serena, John, and Lily, beaming in a summer park. I wasn't in it. A chill ran down my spine. I stood frozen, my chest tightening as years of being pushed to the margins flooded back, heavy and suffocating. I shook my head, trying to dispel the familiar pain, and stuffed the items into my bag, ready to leave. That's when it happened. The lights in the house flickered. Then, with a sharp click, plunged into darkness. I froze, my heartbeat thundering in the sudden silence. Outside, rain began to patter, but there was no storm, no lightning. The electrical system had just failed. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and checked the breaker panel in the hallway. Everything looked fine. No electricity. Muttering a curse, I knew I couldn't leave the house like this. I found a local electrician online, Mike, a middle-aged guy with a warm, gravelly voice. "I'll be right over, kid," he said. "Just stay calm." He arrived in 15 minutes, toolbox in hand. He did a quick check, shaking his head. "Must be an issue with the main system," he mused. "Where's the main box?" I pointed to the basement door, my heart suddenly racing. "Down there, in the basement," I stammered, "but I'm not sure what it's like." "I don't go down often." Mike raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He walked to the door, inspecting the shiny lock. "Locked up this tight? You got treasure down there or something," he joked. I could only manage a weak smile. Serena's warning echoed in my mind. "It's dangerous, Jacob." As a child, I'd obeyed, avoiding conflict. But now, standing before that door, a cold shiver ran through me. Something wasn't right. I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Should we wait for my dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I mean, he might know more." Mike shrugged. "You can wait if you want, but if we don't fix this now, the house will be dark for days. I just need to check the box. Won't take long." He was right. I couldn't leave it. I took a deep breath and nodded. "All right. I'll come with you." Mike pulled heavy-duty bolt cutters from his toolbox and positioned them against the rusted iron lock. The grating sound of metal on metal pierced the quiet, sending goosebumps crawling up my arms. With one strong twist, the lock snapped open. The basement door creaked open, its hinges groaning like a long-imprisoned lament. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying a thick, musty odor mixed with something else, sharp, acrid, like dried blood blended with the remnants of burning incense. My throat tightened. A chill pricked my skin. Step by agonizing step, We descended the old wooden staircase. Mike swept his flashlight around, the weak beam barely piercing the thick darkness, grazing stained concrete walls, dusty shelves, and dark corners I didn't dare look at directly. "Electrical box is probably around here somewhere," he muttered, but his voice trembled. He sensed it too. My own gaze was drawn to a corner where my flashlight beam landed on a rough wooden table covered with a black cloth. On it were half-burned black candles, their wax hardened into long, dripping streaks like dried tears. At the center sat a small glass jar filled with a dark red liquid that glinted under the light. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and caught a sharp, unmistakable smell. Blood. Next to the jar was a crude cloth doll, no bigger than my hand, pierced with rusted pins. On its fabric face, clumsily stitched in red thread, was a single word. Jacob. My breath caught. The air in the room seemed to tighten around my throat. "Good God," Mike whispered, his flashlight freezing on the table. I turned to see him recoil, his face pale in the dim light. "What the hell is this?" he choked out. I could only nod, words failing me. On the table, too, was a small wooden box, its lid open, revealing tiny, milky white animal bones, perhaps from a bird or a rat, mixed with charred paper talismans covered in strange symbols. My head spun. It was like I'd stepped into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I swung my flashlight to the wall, and my heart stopped again. A photograph. It was me. An old picture from college at a picnic, smiling, carefree and naive, unaware it would end up here. Around the photo, a circle had been drawn in red paint, surrounded by bizarre symbols, as if someone had deliberately marked me. Nearby, on a wooden shelf, an open notebook lay sprawled, filled with handwritten scribbles. My name, Jacob Caldwell, repeated over and over, like a relentless curse. "You need to call the police, Jacob," Mike said, his voice now barely a whisper. "This isn't normal. I've never seen anything like this." He took another step back, his eyes wide with fear. I wanted to reassure him, but I couldn't. The pieces in my mind were clicking together, forming a horrifying picture I didn't want to believe. The headaches, the dizziness, the unexplained fatigue. They weren't random. The metallic taste in the food at my father's house. Serena's probing gaze, like she was sizing me up, waiting. The noises from the basement. The times I saw her slip down here in the middle of the night. All those details I dismissed as imagination now screamed at me, clear as day. Serena. My stepmother. She wasn't just distant. She was doing something far, far more sinister. A dark ritual. A curse. A plot to destroy me. I stood there, frozen, my trembling hand clutching my phone. My heart pounded like it would burst through my chest. I wasn't just the abandoned son, pushed to the family's edges. I was the target. Of something dark, malevolent, incomprehensible. I looked back at the cloth doll, my name stitched on it, feeling as though someone were squeezing my heart. Why? Why was Serena doing this? And my father, did he know? Was he part of this twisted scheme? I pulled out my phone, switched on the camera, and started taking pictures of everything. The table with the candles and glass jar, the doll, my photo on the wall, the notebook. Each snapshot a piece of evidence, a way to preserve the truth before it could be erased. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I knew I had to act. I couldn't let fear consume me. Mike stood behind me, still in shock. "Jacob, we should get out of here," he urged. "It's not safe." I nodded, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. A single question echoed in my mind, relentless. Why do they want to destroy me? I thought of my father, a stranger over the years. Of Serena, with her fake smiles and cold eyes. Of John and Lily, innocent siblings who likely knew nothing of the darkness enveloping this family. I turned and climbed the stairs, each step heavy, as if dragging an entire world behind me. Mike followed, silent. When we emerged, I closed the door, but the sense of dread clung to me. I'd just uncovered a secret I couldn't unsee. The Craftsman house, once my home, now felt like a trap. And I, without a doubt, was the prey. I checked my phone, staring at the photos. Each one a stark reminder of the horrifying truth. My legs trembled. Mike, the electrician, stood a few feet away, clutching his toolbox, his face still etched with shock. "Jacob," he said, his voice raspy. "You need to call the police. Right now." I nodded, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Taking a deep breath, I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. I cleared my throat, trying not to stammer. "I'm Jacob Caldwell. I'm at my father's house in the Portland suburbs." I just found something strange in the basement. Things I think are related to some kind of cult, or something dangerous. Please, come quickly. My voice faltered, but I managed to describe it all. The doll, the jar of blood, the symbols. The operator paused, then asked for the address. Mike, sensing my distress, took the phone. I'm Mike, the electrician, he said, his voice steadier than mine. I can confirm. Everything down here is very wrong. You need to send someone now. His confirmation seemed to prioritize the call. The operator instructed us to wait outside, not to touch anything. Mike and I stepped into the front yard, standing under the gray, drizzling sky. I clutched my phone, the photos still open, as if they were the only proof keeping me from doubting myself. Mike said nothing, just stared down the street, tense. Less than 20 minutes later, a police car pulled into the driveway. 2 officers emerged, Harris, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, and Lopez, a younger woman with sharp eyes. You're Jacob Caldwell? Harris asked, his hand resting near his holstered gun. Yes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I called 911. There's something really strange in the basement. You need to check it out. Harris raised an eyebrow, exchanging a glance with Lopez. Strange how, she asked, a hint of skepticism in her tone. I understood. My story sounded like a low-budget horror movie. There's a doll with my name on it, symbols on the walls, and a jar that looks like it's filled with blood, I said, showing them the photos. Harris glanced at them, but didn't seem entirely convinced. Could be someone's prank, he said calmly. Or some weird art project. We'll check it out, but stay calm. Blood rushed to my face. This isn't a prank. I insisted, my voice hardening. I'm not imagining this. Please, just go down there and see. Lopez nodded, gesturing to Harris. All right, lead us down. I took a breath, opened the front door, and guided them to the basement. Mike followed, but kept his distance, clearly not wanting to revisit that horror. The wooden stairs creaked under our feet. The musty, acrid smell hit me again, sending another shiver through me. I turned on my flashlight, illuminating the path. When we reached the basement, I pointed to the black-draped table. Harris and Lopez swept their flashlights around. I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to outright shock. Harris paused at the table, his light falling on the doll with my name. Jesus, he muttered, so low I barely heard him. Lopez stepped closer, examining the glass jar with its dark red liquid, then turned to my photo on the wall, encircled by red paint and strange symbols. She exchanged a look with Harris. No doubt this time. This isn't a prank, Lopez said, her voice grave. We need to seal this place off. Harris nodded, pulling out his radio to call for immediate backup. I stood there, feeling like the world was collapsing. The fear I'd felt was now validated, magnified, by their faces. This wasn't my imagination. Something truly horrific was happening, right in the house I once called home. Soon, an investigative team arrived. Cameras, evidence bags, equipment I couldn't identify. They photographed everything. Detective Carter, a tall officer, asked me to recount the entire incident. I sat in the living room, their flashlights illuminating the darkened house. I told them about the headaches, the dizziness, the strange taste in the food, Serena's suspicious behavior. The noises from the basement, her cold stares, my gut feeling that something was wrong. Carter took careful notes, nodding occasionally. Do you think anyone in your family is involved? He asked, his eyes sharp. I hesitated. I think it's Serena, I said, my voice trembling. She always forbade me from going to the basement. And the meals. I felt worse after eating here. I paused, thinking of my father. My dad? I'm not sure, but I don't think he's entirely innocent. Carter nodded without commenting. He told me to stay in touch and promised a thorough investigation. The house was sealed off with yellow tape. As the police cars drove away, I stood in the front yard, rain soaking my shoulders. A mix of relief, someone finally believed me, and dread. My family, what was left of it, wasn't just broken. It was hiding a dark secret, and I was at its horrifying center. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove straight to my mother's house. When I arrived, she and my grandparents were in the living room, bathed in the warm glow of a lamp. I told them everything, from breaking the lock to what I found. My mother listened, initially skeptical, her eyes filled with worry. Jacob, are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos. When they saw the doll, the jar of blood, my picture on the wall, they were stunned. My grandfather, a man of few words, just shook his head, muttering, "I've never seen anything like this." My mother pulled me into a hug, tears streaming down her face. "My boy," she whispered, her voice choked. I sat there in her arms, feeling like a piece of my heart had shattered. Days passed at my mother's house. I found a fragile piece in her warm kitchen, her comforting stories. But every time I closed my eyes, the images from the basement flooded back. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for news from the police. Carter had promised to follow up, and I knew they were investigating, but the waiting gnawed at me. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure when I'd fall. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed. It was Carter. "Jacob," he said, his voice grave. "You need to come to your father's house now. Your family just returned. We need you here for a confrontation." My heart pounded. "I'll be right there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with worry. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked. I shook my head. "I have to do this alone, Mom." She hugged me tightly, as if trying to transfer her strength to me. As I drove to the Craftsman house, Portland's sky remained gray, mirroring my mood. Pulling onto the familiar street, I saw my father's car parked in the driveway, several suitcases scattered haphazardly. They were back. I took a deep breath, stepped out, and felt my heart racing so loudly I could hear it. The front door was wide open, and my father's angry voice echoed from inside. "What is this nonsense?" he roared, clutching his phone. "Who dared to put police tape on my house?" I stepped inside. The air in the living room froze. My father, Samuel, stood there, face flushed with rage. Serena was beside him, her blonde hair neatly tied back, but I saw her eyes flicker when she saw me. John and Lily, my younger siblings, stood in a corner, looking small and confused. "Jacob," my father said, frowning, his voice lowering but still sharp. "What the hell is going on?" Before I could respond, Serena cut in, her voice icy but controlled. "Richard, I've already called the police," she said. "They said they're sending someone to explain. This must be a mistake. Our house isn't a crime scene." My father waved his phone. "I just spoke to them. They said there was a report from some witness about our basement." Just then, police sirens filled the air outside. Detective Carter walked in, accompanied by officers Harris and Lopez. Behind them, another investigative team, stern expressions, carrying equipment. "Mr. Samuel Caldwell." "Mrs. Serena Caldwell," Carter said, his voice calm but sharp. "We need your cooperation to address some serious concerns regarding this house." Serena forced a stiff, masked smile. "There must be a misunderstanding, officer," she said, saccharine as ever. "We just got back from a trip and know nothing about this." My father nodded, his gaze shifting from me to Carter. "Exactly. I want an explanation right now." Carter didn't respond. He gestured to me. "Jacob, can you tell us what you saw?" I took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. I started speaking, my voice shaky but growing steadier. "I came to pick up some things. Power went out. Called an electrician. Went to the basement to check. Down there, I found." I paused, locking eyes with Serena, and recounted every chilling detail I'd seen. The room fell silent, the air heavy. My father's frown deepened. Serena froze briefly before regaining her composure. "Jacob, what are you talking about?" my father asked, thick with disbelief. "Are you making this up for attention, kid?" But I didn't back down. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos, and handed it to Carter. He held up the screen for my father and Serena to see. "This is what we found," Carter said. "And we need an explanation from both of you." Serena let out a dry, unnatural laugh. "Officer, these are just spiritual items," she said. "A few things I used to pray for the family's safety. There's nothing dangerous about them." She looked at me, her eyes cold, but still holding that calculated smile. "Jacob, you've misunderstood. I'd never do anything to hurt you." Blood rushed to my face. I stepped forward, facing her, my voice shaking but resolute. "You're lying," I said, each word carved from my chest. "What did you do to me? The headaches, the fatigue, the strange taste in the food? It was all you, wasn't it? You wanted me to waste away, didn't you?" My father shot to his feet, his face red with anger. "Jacob, that's enough," he shouted. "You don't talk to your stepmother like that. This is nonsense, a stupid prank." But I didn't back down. I looked him in the eyes, feeling, for the first time, unafraid of him. "Did you know about this, Dad? Or are you part of it too?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He froze, his eyes flickering, but he didn't answer. Carter raised a hand, calling for calm. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, We have clear evidence of a ritualistic setup in the basement, with items specifically targeting Jacob. This isn't a joke. We need a clear explanation, or we'll have to proceed according to the law. Serena began to deflect, her voice growing frantic. I told you, it's just for prayers. I don't know anything about pins or blood. But her eyes, wide with tension and panic, betrayed her lie. My father stood silent, his hands clenched, as if wrestling with himself. I looked at him, hoping for a moment that he'd say something. Defend me. Show me he was still my father. But he just lowered his head. Mute. Suddenly, more police sirens sounded outside. Another investigative team entered, carrying paperwork and an arrest warrant. Carter looked at my father and Serena, his voice cold as steel. Samuel Caldwell. Serena Caldwell. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit premeditated murder. Another officer stepped forward, reading their rights. Lopez and Harris moved in, preparing to cuff them. Serena burst into tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. She struggled, shouting, "You can't do this. I didn't do anything." My father, in contrast, was silent, his face pale, as if his entire world had collapsed. As the police cuffed them, I heard soft sobbing from the staircase. I turned to see John and Lily standing there, eyes red and terrified as they watched their parents being led away. Lily ran to me, hugging me tightly, crying. "Jacob, what's happening?" she asked. I held her, but I didn't know how to answer. John stood still, fists clenched, his eyes filled with anger and pain. As the police escorted my father and Serena to the cars, I stood frozen at the door, watching them disappear behind flashing red and blue lights. Serena glanced back, her eyes no longer masking her fury. My father didn't look at me, didn't say a word. My heart felt crushed, but at the same time, a wave of relief washed over me. The family I'd clung to for so long, the perfect facade of my father, Serena, John, and Lily, was now revealed as something rotten, steeped in lies and darkness. I stood there under the drizzling rain, watching the police cars fade into the distance. Carter patted my shoulder, his voice softer now. "You did well, Jacob. We'll keep investigating. Stay in touch." I nodded, but my mind was reeling. The truth was out, but it left a void in me, part loss, part freedom. A few days later, as the police continued their search of the Craftsman house, Detective Carter called me. "Jacob," he said, his voice serious. "We found some important documents in your father's house. Some of them concern you. We've contacted a lawyer, Mr. Collins, who has worked with your family before. You should meet with him." I gripped the phone tightly, a chill running through me. Documents about me. I agreed to meet Carter and Mr. Collins the next morning. But inside, I couldn't stop wondering what other secrets were waiting for me. Mr. Collins's office was in downtown Portland, a small building with large windows and warm wooden furnishings. When I walked in, Mr. Collins, a man in his 60s with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses, stood to greet me. He had a kind smile, but his eyes carried a gravity that unsettled me. "Jacob, please sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. Detective Carter stood in the corner, nodding at me as if to offer reassurance. On the desk was a thick file, filled with aging papers, some yellowed at the edges. "Jacob," Mr. Collins began, his voice deep and clear. "What I'm about to tell you may be hard to accept, but you need to know the truth." He pushed the file toward me, opening it to a page bearing the familiar signatures of my grandparents. "This is documentation of a trust fund established years ago by your grandparents, Henry and Eleanor Caldwell. The fund is worth approximately $2 million, and it's in your name. You'll inherit it fully when you turn 25. I sat there stunned. $2 million? The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, pressing against my chest. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Why didn't I know about this?" Mr. Collins sighed, pushing his glasses up his forehead. "Your grandparents stipulated that you weren't to be informed until you came of age. All documents were sent to your legal guardian, your father, Samuel. He's known about it for years." Mr. Collins's words hit me like a knife. My father knew. Serena, my stepmother, must have known too. And then, like the final piece of a puzzle snapping into place, it all made sense. Everything that had happened. They wanted me dead. If I were gone, the trust fund would fall to my father, and Serena, with her cunning, would surely find a way to claim it. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to suppress the anger and pain surging within me. Carter stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We've been investigating when Samuel and Serena began planning this," he said. What you found in the basement, combined with these documents, provides strong evidence of their motive. I nodded, but my mind felt numb. My father, the man who once carried me on his shoulders, who taught me to tie my shoes, had chosen money over me. Serena, with her fake smiles and honeyed words, had made me the target of a sinister plot. I felt as if my heart were being torn apart. Yet, at the same time, a cold clarity settled over me. All those years of loneliness, of feeling like I didn't belong in the family, now they made terrifying sense. As I left Mr. Collins's office, I carried a copy of the trust fund documents and a storm of emotions in my heart. On the way back to my apartment, I stopped at a small park, sitting quietly on a bench as memories flooded in. I thought of my childhood, when my grandparents were still alive. My grandfather, with his white hair and warm voice, would sit on the porch, telling me stories of his youthful hunting trips. He taught me how to tie knots, identify plants, and above all, that honesty was the most precious thing. "Jacob, live in a way that you're never ashamed of yourself," he'd said, his eyes shining with conviction. My grandmother was different, gentle like a summer breeze. She'd hold me close, softly singing old folk songs, and cook meals whose smells I still remember. When my parents divorced, it was my grandparents who comforted me. I recalled afternoons in the kitchen with my grandmother, eating freshly baked cookies while she shared stories of her youth. When I was sad about my mother leaving, my grandfather would take me to the garden, showing me how to care for plants, as if to say that life goes on, no matter how much it hurts. My grandfather passed away when I was 13, a sudden stroke. A year later, my grandmother followed, leaving a void I could never fill. But now, sitting on that bench, holding the trust fund documents, I realized they had never truly left me. This trust fund, this $2 million, wasn't just money. It was their love, the final shield they left to protect me. Yet, ironically, that same love had become the reason my father and Serena wanted to destroy me. I felt both pain and gratitude. Pain for the betrayal by those closest to me, driven by greed. Gratitude for my grandparents who, even in death, found a way to shield me. I felt as if they were watching me from somewhere, and I vowed not to let greed or betrayal destroy what they believed in me. That evening, back in my small apartment, I opened the old photo album my mother had sent me long ago. I flipped to a page with a picture of me and my grandparents, taken during a summer picnic. I was an 8-year-old boy, beaming between them, sunlight filtering through the trees. I touched the photo, feeling as if their warmth lingered. "I'll live worthy of this legacy," I whispered, my voice choked. "I won't let greed ruin what you believed in me." The months that followed were a whirlwind of court hearings and sensational headlines. The trial of my father, Samuel Caldwell, and my stepmother, Serena Caldwell, began just a few months after their arrest. I didn't attend every session. I wasn't sure I had the strength to face them again. But I followed along through calls from Detective Carter and brief reports in the local news. The story of the Caldwell family, once a comfortable middle-class household, became the center of public attention. "Murder plot in Craftsman home," one headline screamed. "Occult greed, horrifying secrets in the basement," cried another. Each time I read those words, it felt like someone was squeezing my chest. The trial dragged on. The photos I took in the basement were shown. Experts confirmed the liquid was animal blood. The symbols and rituals were tied to an obscure form of occult practice. My testimony, along with Mike the electrician's and Mr. Collins's, painted a clear picture. Serena was the mastermind, orchestrating the horrific rituals. My father, though not directly involved, was found guilty of complicity for knowing about the trust fund and failing to stop Serena. On the day of the sentencing, I sat in my apartment, clutching my phone. Carter called. "Jacob," he said, his voice steady. "The court has reached a verdict. Samuel Caldwell has been sentenced to 25 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. Serena Caldwell received 30 years for her role as the mastermind and for carrying out the occult activities." I stayed silent, letting his words sink in. 25 years. 30 years. The numbers echoed in my mind, but they didn't bring a sense of triumph. Only a deep sadness, as if I'd lost something forever. The Caldwell family, once my father's pride, was now a stain in the eyes of the world. I hung up, sank into a chair, and stared out the window. Rain fell again, as if to wash away what remained of the past. Time passed. I tried to rebuild my life. I found a stable job at a counseling center, working part-time while preparing for graduate school. The headaches and dizziness gradually faded, as if my body knew the threat was gone. I stayed in touch with John and Lily, but each meeting was marked by their visible pain. They didn't blame me, but I knew they struggled to understand why their parents had done this. I tried to be there for them, but the distance felt unbridgeable. Then came my 25th birthday, 2 years since that horrific discovery. I didn't want a big celebration. That evening, I drove to my mother's house, where she and my grandparents, my maternal ones, had prepared a small party. The kitchen smelled of freshly baked cookies, and on the table was a simple chocolate birthday cake. My mother hugged me, her eyes shining with joy, tinged with worry. "You've really grown up," she said, ruffling my hair as she did when I was a child. My grandparents, though aged, smiled warmly, sharing old stories, trying to pull me back to carefree days. I blew out the candles, cut the cake, and laughed with them. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a birthday. It was the start of a new chapter, one finally free from the weight of the past. The next morning, Mr. Collins called. I knew what was coming. When I stepped into his office, he greeted me with his kind smile. On the desk was a new file and a pale yellow envelope. "Jacob," he said warmly, "today is the day you officially become the legal beneficiary of the trust fund your grandparents left you. $2 million, all yours." He pushed the file toward me, explaining the legal details, but I only half listened. My mind drifted to the old days, when my grandparents were still here, when I was a boy running through their garden. Then Mr. Collins handed me the envelope. "This is from your grandparents," he said. "They wrote it before they passed, instructing me to give it to you when you turned 25. I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. My grandmother's handwriting, soft and elegant, spelled my name on the front. "Thank you," I managed, emotions welling up. "For everything." That afternoon, I walked to a nearby park where the maple trees were turning a vibrant red. I sat on a bench, opened the envelope, and began to read. My grandparents' words came alive, as if they were speaking directly to me. "Dear Jacob, you are our greatest joy. No matter how hard life gets, no matter what challenges you face, remember that you are stronger than you know. We left this trust for you not just for a better life, but so you can live true to your heart. Live kindly, honestly, and never let darkness dim the light inside you. Love you forever, Grandpa Henry and Grandma Eleanor." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I smiled. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of release, as if I'd finally found a home. Not the craftsman house steeped in darkness, but a home within my own heart. My grandparents, though gone, were still with me, guiding me through their loving words. A few weeks after my 25th birthday, a letter arrived at my apartment, sent from the Oregon State Penitentiary. The plain white envelope bore my father's scrolled handwriting, Samuel Caldwell. My heart raced. I sat at the table, hands trembling as I opened it. The short lines, written in blue ballpoint pen, seemed like they took great effort to compose. "Jacob, I know you don't want to see me, but I need to talk to you one last time as your father. I don't expect forgiveness, but please let me see you. You're still my son. Samuel." I read the letter over and over, each word piercing like a needle. Father. The word felt foreign, like a memory from another life. I thought of the years growing up in his indifference. The times he chose work, chose Serena over me. I thought of the basement, the pinned cloth doll, the trust fund he and Serena were willing to kill me for. Part of me wanted to tear the letter up, throw it away, forget he ever existed. But another part urged me to face him one last time, not to reconcile, but to close the chapter. I spent several sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had the strength to walk into that room, look into his eyes, and say goodbye. Finally, I decided to go. Not for him, but for myself. I needed to end the past, to break the chains holding me back. I called the prison to confirm the visit. The next morning, I drove there, my heart heavy but my resolve unshaken. The Oregon State Penitentiary sat on the outskirts, a gray fortress of high concrete walls and barbed wire. I passed through security, feeling as if I were entering another world, cold, dark, and filled with metallic echoes. A guard led me to the visitation room, a small space with white walls and a thick glass partition. I sat on a hard plastic chair, hands clasped tightly, trying to stay calm. The door on the other side opened. My father walked in. I barely recognized him. Samuel Caldwell. Once a man who exuded authority, now looked haggard, his hair grayer, his face gaunt, his eyes weary. He wore an orange prison uniform, his hands cuffed, but he tried to hold his head high, as if clinging to a shred of the father I once knew. He sat down, picked up the phone, and looked at me through the glass. "Jacob," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond right away, just stared at him as if seeing a stranger. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice colder than I'd intended. He attempted a weak smile, but it faded quickly. I just wanted to talk. I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I let things go too far. His voice faltered, but I felt no pity. His words sounded hollow, like a poorly acted play. You knew about the trust fund, I said, locking eyes with him. You knew what Serena was doing and you didn't stop her. He bowed his head, his eyes red, but he didn't deny it. I was wrong, Jacob, he whispered. I got caught up in ambition and what Serena said. I thought she was doing what was best for the family. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Family? You call that a family? You chose her. You chose money over me. He didn't respond. His head lowered, as if my words were too heavy to bear. The door on his side opened again, and Serena was let in. My blood ran cold. Her once glossy blonde hair was disheveled. Her face harsh, stripped of the polished facade that hid her true nature. Her eyes, cold and venomous, locked onto me. She picked up the phone, her voice still clinging to that fake sweetness. Jacob, you've misunderstood, she said. The things in the basement, they were just spiritual rituals. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at her, my gaze unwavering. Don't call me your son, I said, my voice low but sharp. You tried to kill me, Serena. Stop lying. She stiffened, her lips trembling, but her eyes burned with resentment, as if she hated me for ruining her plans. You don't understand, she muttered, her voice weakening, as if she knew the truth was undeniable. I stood, setting the phone down. I didn't come here to hear excuses, I said, looking from my father to Serena. I came to say I'm done with you both. This family died a long time ago. I'm not your son anymore, and I'm not your family. I'm choosing my own life, and there's no place in it for either of you. I turned and walked out, not looking back. I heard my father call my name, his voice breaking, but I didn't stop. Stepping out of the prison, I breathed in the free air, feeling as if I'd shed a burden carried for years. The visitation room door closed behind me, and I knew it was also closing on my past. I was no longer chained by memories of my father, Serena, or the craftsman house steeped in darkness. Ahead of me lay an open road, and for the first time, I felt truly free. From that day forward, I severed all contact with Samuel and Serena. No letters, no calls, no mention of them in conversations. They became part of my past, a scar on my heart, but no longer something that defined me. I focused on the present, on what I could build, and on a dream I'd nurtured for years, becoming a counselor to help young people like me, those who grew up in broken families, find the light within themselves. I enrolled in a graduate program in psychology. The months that followed were a blur of classes, part-time shifts at the counseling center, and late nights hunched over my desk, scribbling notes. There were moments of exhaustion, but whenever I looked at my grandparents' letter, carefully tucked into my notebook, I found the strength to keep going. Live true to your heart, they had written. And I was determined to do just that. The $2 million trust fund my grandparents left me was a significant responsibility, but I managed it carefully. A portion covered my tuition and living expenses, ensuring I could focus on my studies without financial worry. Another portion was invested long-term, following the advice of a financial advisor Mr. Collins recommended. I didn't want the money to be just a number. I wanted it to mean something. So, I established a small fund in my grandparents' name, the Henry and Eleanor Fund, to support children who, like me, grew up without a complete sense of home. Each thank you letter from a charity felt like an extension of the love my grandparents had given me. With the remaining money, I bought a modest house in the Portland suburbs. Not the craftsman house, filled with painful memories, but a cozy place with large windows overlooking a small garden. I painted the walls a soft blue, hung photos of my mother, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and turned it into a true home. One afternoon, I called my mother, my voice hesitant but full of hope. Mom, I want you to move in with me. This house, I want it to be our home. There was a pause. Then I heard her laugh, tinged with tears. Jacob, my boy, she said, I'll be there. And so she moved in, bringing her old stories, her home-cooked meals, and evenings spent reminiscing. For the first time in years, I felt I truly had a family, not bound by blood, but by love. As the months passed, I found an inner peace. The nightmares of the basement, the cloth doll, and the jar of blood no longer haunted me. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night, no longer feared thinking of my father or Serena. Instead, I found joy in simple things, brewing coffee for my mother in the morning, an inspiring class at school, an afternoon helping a child at the counseling center share their pain. In me, my grandparents' memory became a guiding light. Their love, preserved in their letter and old photos, was strong enough to remind me that true love still existed, not from my father or Serena, but from those who chose to love me unconditionally. I also learned lessons no classroom could teach. I realized that blood doesn't always mean love. My father, once my entire world, chose greed over me. Serena, with her fake smiles and dark schemes, taught me that family isn't about shared blood, but about those who make you feel safe and loved. I learned to let go of hatred, not because they deserved it, but because I refused to become like them, consumed by greed or malice. I chose forgiveness, not to erase what they did, but to free myself. My journey came to a quiet close one afternoon as I sat in my small backyard garden, watching wildflowers sway in the breeze. I thought of the boy Jacob, once frightened and alone in the craftsman house, believing he was unworthy of love. That boy had grown up, carrying scars, but also a new belief. The past may leave marks, but it doesn't dictate the future. I smiled, breathed in the fresh air, and felt a new beginning. Not loud or showy, but brimming with hope. My story didn't end with applause or fanfare. It ended in stillness, with the sound of birds chirping and sunlight filtering through the trees. In that moment, I knew I had found myself. Not the abandoned son, not the target of a plot, but Jacob Caldwell, a man ready to live with an open heart, despite the darkness that once tried to consume me.